Good evening, everybody. I welcome you to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live over the internet on the Council's website. Councillors will be available after the meeting if any member of the gallery wish to discuss issues of interest. We'll commence the meeting with the following prayer. I'll leave that in the capable hands of Councillor Ross. Councillor Ross, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the betterment of the peoples of Cardinia Shire. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor Ross. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and the Wurundjeri people and pay respects to their elders past, present and future. Apologies this evening is nil. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of the meeting as listed? Can I have a mover? Councillor Jodie Owen, a seconder. Councillor Ryan. All those in favour? For? Carried. Councillors, are there any declaration of interest for this evening? The Council conducts its meetings accordingly to the consent agenda. Councillors have advised of the matters for consideration this evening that they wish to discuss or debate. The remaining items will be adopted without discussion. Before moving to the items on the agenda, we have received several questions relating to the Glismann Rd development plan. That is item 1 on the agenda this evening. We've decided as councillors to bring these questions forward so that they may be answered before the council debates the item of business, and I think respectfully to the gallery that are here this evening. Firstly, the question received from Linda Amos. Is Linda Amos in the building? Thank you, Linda, for your question. I'll refer your question to the General Manager of Livable Communities, Ms. Parker. Thank you, Tracy. Could you recite the question and give it the answer? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the first question, was, given that the Glismann Rd development process has been going on for at least 12 years, leaving landowners living in a state of uncertainty, what strategies will Council put in place to ensure that this process is dealt with as a matter of priority? Will a timeline be provided to the landowners? Broken some of these questions down. So Council officers are certainly keen to proceed with this amendment. We originally lodged the amendment back in March of 2018 with the Minister for Planning. However, the Minister would not provide authorisation to exhibit this amendment in that current form. Once authorisation is obtained from the Minister, Council officers will be able to provide residents with exhibition dates and estimated panel hearing dates. Exact dates will be determined by Planning Panels Victoria. At the end of the process, if approval is recommended, the final decision lies with the Minister for Planning, and Council cannot control the timeframes from the Minister in terms of him making a decision. The second question was, I understand that no development can commence until the traffic lights and other infrastructure roads are installed, put in place. What steps have and will Council take to ensure that this occurs as a priority? As you've correctly indicated, the intersection is at capacity and no development can commence until the traffic lights and other infrastructure, being roads, are installed or put in place. As detailed in our council report this evening, we acknowledge that Glismann Rd is an unsealed road and that any future development within the Glismann Rd development plan area not only triggers the need for road construction and traffic management, but also additional infrastructure such as public open space and shared paths, both within and within the boundary of the development plan area. The intersection of the Old Princess Highway, Glismann Road and Beaconsfield Avenue currently operate unsatisfactorily, and this intersection must be signalised prior to any further development. When this council report was prepared, the staging of the Princess Highway intersection works was not confirmed. So in the report we indicated that council had received $17.8 million had been allocated for 8 intersection upgrades along the Princess Highway. Currently, council officers are seeking prices for the detailed design of O'Neill Road, Glismann Road and Bayview Road intersections, taking into consideration the pre-planning that's required and given the magnitude of the program, works in the ground possibly to commence in late 2020. But we're still working through those costings and that time frame at the moment. Just checking. I've still got Linda's questions. Yep. The next question was, over many years, landowners have been told that no land would be compulsorily acquired for this process. How then does council see this plan proceeding if landowners refuse to sell land that is critical for surrounding sites to develop? The Glismann Road Development Plan amendment does not propose to include a public acquisition overlay. The development plan aims to provide a framework for an integrated design approach to the fragmented land ownership. So we won't be compulsory acquiring any land. It'll be based on the individual landowners to choose when they want to actually develop their land. The next question was, how then does council see this plan proceeding if landowners refuse to sell land that is critical for the surrounding sites to develop? So with the amendment, we've proposed a development plan, and the aim of this is to ensure that all landowners are aware of what land is required to allow development to occur. Development plans may take a number of years to implement as a result of landowners not wanting to sell or to develop. The development plan cannot force any landowner to sell or to develop. Next question was, can you explain in layman terms the financial impact on current landowners under the proposed DCP model? Will current landowners be asked for financial contributions such as levies or DCP contributions up front, regardless of whether or not they intend to develop? Or will council contribute all of the funds up front and recoup costs when development applications are sought by future developers? So the DCP contribution is actually triggered at the time of subdivision of land. So a planning permit for subdivision will include a condition that the payment of the DCP levy needs to be made prior to the issue of a statement of compliance. So the statement of compliance is the last piece of documentation that you actually need to be able to go to the land titles office to get title release. So prior to the statement of compliance, we'd require the DCP to be paid. The development plan, the development contributions plan will be prepared in accordance with the Planning and Environment Act. The exhibited amendment documentation will include the DCP, which will outline all items proposed to be included in the DCP, the cost, the timing of the delivery of the infrastructure, how the cost is to be distributed, as well as items that are not included in the DCP and how the DCP will be managed. The DCP document will also address how the DCP will be administered, the timing of payment and how funds generated by the DCP will be managed in terms of reporting, indexation and review periods. Development proponents who wish to bring projects forward of the timing identified in the DCP will need to discuss their proposals with council as a work-in-kind agreement, with timing of any credit for works may also be negotiated between the parties. So a lot of the information that you're looking for in that question will actually come out in the formalised amendment documentation. Next question, next person.
Thank you, Ms Parker. Well, very well answered, and thank you for your time. Secondly, the question from Lynn Williams. Lynn Williams, thank you, Lynn. I refer your question again to General Manager of Livable Communities, Ms Parker. Thank you, Tracy.
So thank you, Lynn, through Mr Mayor. The first question was, in regards to costings, what percentage of the infrastructure items will be met by council? What percentage by developers and what percentage by landowners? Have the costs to council been budgeted for, or does this mean further time spent holding up the process? As landowners have continuously indicated, the plan has been designed for one or two developers to implement. How has this plan and council reconciled the issue of reliance upon neighbours and neighbouring properties for development to occur? In response to this one, once the Minister for Planning provides consent for Council to prepare and exhibit the planning scheme amendment for the Glismann Rd area, full documentation about the proposed changes to the planning scheme will be made available. Council has in this process also committed to an 8-week exhibition period, and the amendment documentation will include the DCP, and it will outline all the items proposed to be included in the DCP. And as I indicated before, it will include the costing, the timing of delivery of the infrastructure, and how the cost is distributed, items that are not included in the DCP, and how the DCP will be managed. In regards to the issue around reliance upon neighbours, we've tried our best through the development, the creation of the development plan, to enable as many property owners as possible to develop. However, as I've indicated before, we can't force landowners to develop, so that will, the development plan in itself may not completely get off the ground as proposed. So the next question was, what has Council spent in monetary figures on the plan to date, including wages, reports, meetings, plans, etc.? What is budgeted for in the future? I'm sorry, but at the moment I can't provide you with an exact cost that we've spent on the matter. What I can advise you is that no additional funding had been provided to the strategic planning team to process the amendment, and it has been undertaken within normal annual budget allocations. The last question was, what are the benefits to the ratepayers who will be funding this project when the developers are the ones who will profit from the most? Ratepayers will see through the development plan there's provision for additional open space areas, there's provisions for shared footpaths and key pedestrian networks, as well as improvements to the O'Neill Road reserve area.
Thank you, Ms Parker. Thank you very much for your answers. Our final question on this item, we're only doing the questions and answers on the Glismann Road development. The remaining questions and answers we'll leave to the end of the council meeting. But your final questions from Kathy Bryant. Kathy, you here? Thank you, Kathy. I'll refer your question again to General Manager of Livable Communities, Ms Parker. Very busy tonight, Ms Parker, to ask the questions and to the answers on those. Thanks. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you, Kathy, for your questions. So the first part of the question was, is Council planning to force Glismann Road residents to pay for the road and other infrastructure even when they don't want their property developed? So the first thing I wanted to say on this one is that Council is currently proposing a planning scheme amendment. Landowners and local residents will have the opportunity to make a submission to Council regarding the rezoning and the development plan and the DCP. Council will consider all the submissions that are received, and after consideration of submissions, if Council wishes to proceed with the amendment, then all the submissions will be referred to an independent panel appointed by the Minister for Planning for consideration. Submitters will then have the opportunity to be heard by the panel. If the amendment is approved, the DCP will only be payable after a subdivision permit has been granted, and payment is required prior to the issue of the Statement of Compliance. If landowners do not want to develop their land, no DCP fees are payable. The next question was, is Council so determined to develop Glismann Road that will go to the extent of compulsory acquiring residents' land? Is it worth it? The proposed Glismann Road amendment does not propose to include a public acquisition overlay. The development plan aims to provide a framework for an integrated design approach to the fragmented land ownerships. That's it.
Thank you, Tracy. I hope these questions and answers at this time, prior to this item being brought up this evening, will help and assist our councillors and the gallery, showing transparency to these particular items for tonight. Now we'll move on to the item withdrawn for discussion. And I must explain the term withdrawn confuses the community no end when I say withdrawn doesn't mean that it's not to be brought up. That means it is to be brought up and discussed. So the first item for withdrawal tonight is item 1. It's AMC 238 Glismann Road Development Plan and Development Contributions Plan Authorisation Request, as withdrawn by Councillor B Owen. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following. It is a alternate motion. I move the officer's recommendation to seek authorisation to prepare and exhibit amendment C238, subject to the inclusion of an additional dot point to read the following: that during the formal exhibition process of the proposed planning scheme amendment, that the Minister for Education be sent a copy of previous correspondence between Council and the Minister with regards to the possible options for the Beaconsfield Primary School as part of the development plan and planning scheme amendment process. I move so.
Thank you, Councillor Brett Owen. Could I have a seconder for that amendment, please? Councillor Jeff Springfield. Back to you, Councillor Brett Owen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jeff Springfield. Just clarifying, I'm moving the officer's recommendation that's on page 4 with that additional comment about the Education Department and the Beaconsfield Primary School. I do note the many questions and emails that councillors have received over the last couple of days. We have received quite a number in relation to this matter, so I acknowledge receipt of those emails, and I know a lot of those questions have been answered by Ms Parker, so thank you, Mayor, for allowing those questions to be heard and answered before deliberating on this matter. This report clearly defines the direction of council. I do not deny that it has been a long process for many residents. I believe it's been over 12 years, and I've sort of been part of council for over 12 years, so I do have appreciation of the pain that they've gone through. But in my opinion, I do not believe council has dragged its feet in relation to this ongoing matter. I appreciate the stress of residents regarding uncertainty. I empathise with them. Goalposts have regularly changed over the years for various reasons. In October 2018, council resolved that a developer contribution plan or infrastructure contribution plan is not proposed for the area due to the high cost of the intersection of Glismann Rd, Old Princess Highway, Beaconsfield Avenue. So there was a lot of uncertainty. Let the market decide if it was to develop. That intersection would have to be delivered, and we know how hard that would to deliver. You would require one owner, willing to pay for that intersection. We know that would not be viable, particularly with the land holdings and the sizes of properties. Council still supported to proceed and try and get some certainty, but with that difficulty, it was a challenge. In February 2019, as the report outlined, there was a federal government announcement, $17.8 million for 8 intersections, including Beaconsfield Avenue, Glismann Road, and the Old Princess Highway. This announcement was a game changer, no doubt, for the development of this area and also the many intersections that will be delivered. Now that the intersection will be delivered via other means, and this intersection is valued at $3.2 million at this current market price, this intersection will no longer require to be funded by DCP or other abutting landholders, council as well. Other landholders are those in Glismann Road, but also other abutting landholders, it could be the school across the road, etc. So it is now appropriate to ask the Minister to commence the process with a DCP. A lot of comments about, where does this intersection rate with council as a priority, and I've been speaking with our engineers, and personally, this is a priority of mine out of those 8 intersections along with O'Neill Road. We know that this intersection is at capacity. We know O'Neill Road is at capacity, and as detailed by Ms Parker, that council is currently designing those 3 intersections as well as Bayview Road. So in my mind, this is a priority of council. The only sort of disclaimer about this is that Vic Roads has to agree that this will be a priority of works, and council is of the view that this intersection with the other 2 intersections should be a priority and be the first ones to be delivered. We know that this intersection is at capacity. There's accidents at Glismann Road every day. I see it on Facebook. I live in Beaconsfield. I see it. O'Neill Road is very similar, so no doubt this should be a priority. This report asks for authorisation from the Minister to prepare and exhibit the amendment. Once authorisation has been received by the Minister, Council proposes an 8-week exhibition. This is double the regular exhibition period that normally would exist for such a amendment process. This extended period acknowledges the complexity of the history of this amendment and the need for affected landowners to have the time to prepare their submission. Council's dedicated planner to this amendment is committed to once again sitting down with each affected landholder. In their submissions, landowners can consider the amendment documents and determine how it affects them. Things to consider may include densities, proposed infrastructure items in the DCP item lists, the design and the status of Glismann Road construction, and the open space allocations. Council is proposing DCP items. It is outlined on page 9, and some of these include, obviously, Glismann Road from Old Princess Highway to the first roundabout, construction within existing road reservation. The first roundabout on Glismann Road, construction and purchase of land, splays on the eastern side of Glismann Road. Part of West Loop Road, southern end, from Glismann Road, first roundabout to the West Loop Road along the easement, construction and purchase of land. Part of West Loop Road, northern end, from Glismann Road, second roundabout to the West Loop Road along the easement, construction and purchase of the land. The local park, embellishment and the purchase of the land. Shared paths from Glismann Road to O'Neill Road Recreation Reserve, construction. The costs of preparation of the Glismann Road DCP, and also a final contribution percentage to be determined in relation to the O'Neill Road Recreation Reserve. So all these items can be debated by landowners and sort of questioned if they feel they should not be contributing, or through the DCP, should not be contributing to those items. Resident submissions will come back to council, which will for council to make comment on their submissions, vary the plan before, and an independent panel will make a determination, and that is an independent panel. Over the years, there has been many versions of the proposed amendment, and I understand there's been many plans, documents. So by wrapping this up, to this point now, residents can say, all right, what is the current plan? What are the DCPs? So they've got a clear understanding of what's proposed, because over 12 years, there's been a number of different plans. So it wraps this up nicely that residents are fully aware of this amendment and the current status. If the final amendment is accepted and adopted and implemented in the planning scheme, no resident will be forced to subdivide or develop or pay DCPs, and that was clearly outlined in Ms Parker's responses to the various questions. However, I do acknowledge that any change of zoning may affect the valuations of land and therefore may increase rates, and we've seen speculative purchases already. That has caused a lot of concern to existing residents when paying their rates, and I do acknowledge that. I do appreciate this may be a significant financial burden on landholders. So in summary, in the conclusion, over the last few years there has been ongoing discussion about what planning tools should be used to fund the provision of infrastructure within the Glismann Road development plan area. DALWIP supports the use of DCPs for the Glismann Road area. Now that the funding has been secured for the signalised intersection at Glismann Road, Old Princess Highway and Beaconsfield Avenue, Council's financial risk, liability and other landowners' risk, liability with a DCP for the Glismann Road has been significantly reduced, with the federal government funding that intersection, and that is appreciated. It is recommended Council seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare and exhibit Amendment C238 to the Cardinia Planning Scheme, subject to specific requirements as outlined in the recommendation. So I move so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brett Owen, for your very detailed report. Thank you. I'll go to the seconder, Councillor Jeff Springfield. Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my colleague, Councillor Owen, for moving this report. Great detail was explained by Councillor Owen then. I won't go over and try and re-explain it. I'd just like to say quickly that I understand the frustrations that have been felt by these residents over this long drawn-out period. I completely empathise with the uncertainty that's been present in the past, and the process we're putting forward today is we hope to clear up this uncertainty as soon as we can in the near future, so we can move forward with this. it is council's intention to find the best outcome for local residents through this plan, through development of this plan. And so we are eager to put the draft out for exhibition so we can receive feedback and get comments on this to see where everyone sits with it and how they feel, and to see if it can even be done better than what we have in mind. I can see by the questions raised earlier, there is still a lot of confusion around all this, which is very understandable because the planning laws in any state of the state government are confusing, and it's confusing for us, and we get explained by our top-notch managers here on a weekly basis that go through these points. So for the residents, it's understandable how it is so confusing. But just to reiterate, there will be no compulsory acquisition put on the table for anyone's properties within this plan or within any future plan moving forward, while I'm sitting here on council, or while we have this in mind. It's not about pushing people to do what they don't want to do, to sell up or to change the amenity of their property in a way that they don't wish to. This is to help guide in an integrated design approach to govern any future development of this parcel of land where we're talking about, of Glismann Rd. It may never get off the ground. Once the plan is finally developed and outlines how to help to govern the future development, if or so when it does happen in the future, that actually may never eventuate unless the first cabs off the rank want to step up and build this infrastructure, which we've talked about. But without a plan in mind, without a plan for the future to enable delivery of all the required infrastructure to see any type of development happen in this last parcel of land which has development all around it, then we need to go through this process. And again, I apologise on behalf of myself and the previous councils that this has taken so long, but it's out of the hands of our council officers. They've tried their best to deliver this in as timely fashion as possible, but there have been many hurdles and goalposts changing along the way. So hopefully we are on the right track moving forward from this point, and we can soon find the best outcome for all the residents involved. Thank you, Mayor.
Well said, Councillor Springfield. Thank you. Any other speakers, any other councillors would like to speak on this item? Councillor Jodie Owen. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be really brief. I also am sorry to the residents for it taking this long, but I just wanted to make one comment because I've had a couple of phone calls, although it's not my ward. I want people living in Glismann Rd to know that they are safe, that we are not going to be selling land from underneath you. We are not going to be doing anything that you do not want done. So that means you can go about living your lives without any fear of what might happen. We've worked hard on this. We're hoping with the public consultation that you feel involved and can have input into it, and that you understand that we here at Council have listened to you. I'd also like to reiterate with what Councillor Owen Brett said. This evening, once again, I was 15 minutes late for Council due to a motor vehicle accident just past Glismann Rd. So there's definitely roadworks that are very much needed and probably well over needed. But I'm just hoping that this mention at this meeting tonight and this proposal gives you guys some understanding that we have listened and we are trying to do the very best for you as residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jodie Owen. Any other speakers on this subject? No other speakers. Before I go back to the mover, Councillor Owen, and I hope you're okay, Councillor Jodie Owen, after that accident on the way in here tonight. At risk of taking the thunder or the report away from the mover, I'd just like to mention the staff of Cardinia Shire Council has done a fantastic job in this space. It might not be recognised all the time and every time, but in this particular item, it has been a very difficult item to get through. We've been, I think, through about 3 managers since it all started from my mill. Been here for 9 years, and so it's been a difficult one to pick up and drop and pick up. And believe me, their heart's been in the right place. It's not just a job in these circumstances. It is something that they've taken very seriously, and we have as council. And I just want to thank the staff who are in the gallery tonight, and I want to thank them for being here tonight as well, as because it is very important to us to support our staff, because they support the communities so well. And I think we've done very well in that place. Sorry, Councillor Owen, I just wanted to mention that. I know you would have said that, and I'm actually taking the words out of your mouth. But I'll go back to the mover to sum up. Thank you, Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor, and definitely thank you, Mayor, for mentioning that. I also thank the staff, and as I said before, the officers are committed to sitting down with the landowners once again through this process going forward. Just in relation to my additional dot point, it is just that further engagement with the education department. Beaconsfield Primary School is quite unique. Most schools now are designed on, usually 3 or 4 frontages. Beaconsfield Primary School has 2. This is an opportunity to improve the school community, which has an overall benefit to the Beaconsfield community. And if there is possibilities to improve frontages to the school, improve the school community through this development, I think it should be explored. It's just, again, writing to the Minister to get the Minister of Education, and I hope the school community as well, school council, to consider the opportunities that if this area is to develop, what opportunities could be for the school, which has wider benefits for the wider community. So just acknowledge that. I do note, as Councillor Springfield did say about confusion, and I do encourage residents to continue to engage with the officers, sit down. This is a milestone, and I think there is light at the end of the tunnel that with that announcement with the intersection that we will see this move forward much faster than we have previously. I encourage landowners to write their submissions. I encourage all residents of the Shire, particularly those who live in Beaconsfield, to think about what this development may look like and the proposed DCPs, and provide comment. It is open to all residents and community groups to make a submission. It is challenging, like any other infill development that we have in our Shire. Officer, for instance, is a prime example of the challenges that we have with infill development with smaller land holdings. And Glismann Rd is exactly the same, where you rely on other people to develop as well or bring forward infrastructure. So the challenges of Glismann Rd is not unique to other areas, but I do note that is a challenge. So I think this is a positive. I think residents will see light there for this to move forward, and hopefully the Minister will agree for this to be exhibited, and panel will come further, and this will progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brett Owen. Well done. Okay, councillors, all those in favour? 4. Carried. Thank you. Item 2, subdivision of land into 9 lots and creation of an access to the road zone category 1 at 400 Rossiter Road, Cooey-Rupp. Withdrawn by Councillor Ray Brown. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that a notice of motion to grant planning permit T 180293 be issued for the subdivision of land into 9 lots and creation of access to a road zone category 1 at 400 Rossiter Road, Cooey-Rupp, subject to conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ross. Back to you, Councillor Brown, the mover. Thank you. And I know you've got a sore throat at the moment, Councillor, and I respect that. Thank you.
I have, and I'll try to keep it brief for my own sake. Mayor, I asked for this item to be deferred from the previous planning meeting so that I could satisfy myself with some aspects, particularly the traffic management options. I've met with the planning officers, including speaking with Council's traffic engineer, and have been assured that all aspects of safety have been met and have Vic Road's absolute approval. So I think it's appropriate that we can go ahead with this. The original plan submitted with the application proposed the land be subdivided into 10 lots, with a central court bowl access designed as common property. After negotiation with Council's Planning Department, the applicant submitted these revised plans, and they are: the proposal is to subdivide the land into 9 lots, not 10. The lots will measure between 700 and 768 square metres and will be serviced by a single road at the eastern property boundary onto Rossiter Road. The sides of Lot 1 and 2, fronting Rossiter Road, will be reduced in order with the condition to provide an internal service road that will eventually eliminate all access from Rossiter Road. In addition, lots 8 and 9 will be required to be modified to provide a splay for the safe access of waste and emergency vehicles. The site is located towards the north-eastern entrance of Cooyrup Township. Along Rossiter Road, it is within walking distance of schools, shops and other amenities. The application has been advertised twice, once with the original proposal, that is the 10 on a bowl setup, and then again with this amended proposal, all within the prescribed timelines, by sending notices to owners and occupiers of adjoining land and placing a sign on the site. There were 6 objectors, with only 1 objector submitting a further objection to the amended proposal. However, Council is required to consider all objections made in regard to the original application and the amended application. The objections were non-compliance with the Cooyrup Township strategy, non-compliance with public access provisions, lack of respect for neighbourhood character, specifically with regard to the country feel of Cooyrup and in contrast with nearby Lauriston Park Estate, which has predominantly 3 and 4 bedroom residents on 900 square metre allotments. No provision of a footpath to Townley Road and the only footpath into town located across Rossiter Road. The addition of a new intersection to cause traffic issues, especially with nearby industrial land and secondary school, provision of sewerage and issues with common property. I'll go into those objections in detail a little later. The proposal is referred to all the relevant authorities. AusNet had no objection to proposal subject to conditions that connections are planned and approved accordingly. The Country Fire Authority referred, they had no objection to subject to fire hydrants being provided. Melbourne Water had no objection and required no conditions. South East Water, no objection to the proposal subject to conditions, and that is stormwater and runoff plans submitted and approved and sewer connections to all sites. Vic Roads, the application referred to Vic Roads, had no objection, subject conditions such as road standards as shown in the conditions at the back of this document. The proposal is consistent with the state and local planning policy frameworks. The subdivision will increase the supply of residential land within a small township and therefore increase housing diversity and improving housing affordability, whilst providing a subdivision layout that can integrate well with the surrounding neighbourhood and township character. The subdivision is generally in accordance with the Cooyrup Township strategy, not all of it, but generally in accordance. And the township strategy really is an incorporated document that ensures that any proposed use or development within or around Cooyrup Township is generally consistent with the Cooyrup Township strategy, with such as the orientation of buildings, spaciousness, setbacks, fences, minimum lot widths of 18 metres to encourage larger allotments and also discourage small allotments of less than 600 square metres. There's quite a host of conditions in the township strategy that in the main are very, very effective towards developing a better township. The subdivision is generally in accordance with the township strategy, with most lots measuring over 700 square metres. Whilst the plans submitted show all lots measuring over 700 square metres, it is noted that a 16 metre wide service road will be required via condition to run parallel to Rossiter Road to align with the future development plan overlay. This will reduce the lot sizes of 1 and 2, which both currently measure 720 square metres, by approximately 384 square metres. This will result in lots 1 and 2 measuring less than 600 square metres. Finally, it's noted that lots 3 to 8 will measure less than 18 metres in width. They will still maintain a sense of spaciousness at approximately 16 metres in width. The provision of in general, the proposal is consistent with the township strategy, achieves a sense of spaciousness with 78% of the lots measuring over 700 square metres. And with adequate restrictions on the title, it can be assured that setbacks and garden areas will require future development to respect the preferred township character. Importantly, as noted by the tribunal, which is the, what do we call that tribunal? VCAT. The planning scheme only requires a proposal to be generally consistent with the township strategy. It causes a lot of angst because the township, Kurup town people think that the township strategy is the Bible, but when we've gone to VCAT in the past, it's been usually kicked out because the applications only have to be generally consistent. It does not prescribe strict compliance, so that's something that we have to live with, I'm afraid, but nevertheless, it's there. Now, as I mentioned before, a requirement of this development is to provide a service road parallel to Rossiter Road. It's critical to provide the safe and efficient flow of vehicles from Sims Lane. For those who don't know the area, Sims Lane is on the outer perimeter to Supreme Close, which is a runoff from Townley Road, which is opposite the secondary college. And the key element of the development overlay 24. Placement of the service lane will allow for the eventual closure of all access points to Rossiter Road once the development contemplated by the DPO is realised. In total, there's about 4 lots of land, about the same size as this plot of land, fronting Rossiter Road. This is the first stage of development, so the officers in their wisdom have got a development plan overlay to provide the safe and the proper development of this site. So part of it is to, in the finish, is to have no access to Rossiter Road at all, except for Sims Lane and also Townley Road via Supreme Close. Because the plans submitted with the application do not include the provision of this service road, a condition will be placed on the permit to submit amended plans, including the service road, prior to certification. This condition will allow for the orderly planning of the area in compliance with Section 60 of the Act by enabling the ultimate plan for DPO 24 to proceed. To allow the subdivision, as I mentioned previously, it's 1 part of 4, with such a condition would substantially obstruct efforts to realise the plan overlay by creating a cascading effect on the subdivision of future lots that would result in additional points to Rossiter Road, which of course would provide additional traffic impacts. So what is not on the application is the provision of the service road, but it's in the documents here for anybody to have a look at, Mayor. I'm struggling a little bit with my throat, I'm sorry. So if I could go back now to the objectors' concerns, the non-compliance with the Kurup Township strategy regarding the block sizes and guideline for 80% of lots to measure over 700 square metres. Well, there are 78% in this development, so 2% is not bad. But it's cheating a little bit because the front lots will be reduced a bit as well, so it's very close. Non-compliance with public access provisions, which concerns common areas. Now, the construction of the road with a bowl at the other end of it was intended to be a common road, which included no footpaths, or didn't include footpaths, is a better way to put it, I guess. So this is not relevant now because there will be full curb and channeling and footpath on one side of the road. And there was concerns regarding stormwater management. As I expressed before, this must be planned and approved accordingly. A lack of respect for neighbourhood character, specifically regard to the country feel of Cooey-Rup, and the contrast with nearby Lauriston Park Estate, which has predominantly 3 and 4 bedroom residents on 900. Building envelopes and fencing will be required by a restriction on the title. However, the allotments in Lauriston Park measure from 500 square metres to 2 hectares. So they're in close proximity. So most of these blocks are very well placed to measure against those in Lauriston Park. So they're comparable and do not unreasonably deviate from the pattern of provision in the area. The one thing that people were concerned about was the provision of a footpath from this development to Townley Road, which is the next connecting road. That footpath would constitute an extra 120 metres of properly constructed footpath, and it has no place in preventing this subdivision to go ahead, and it would be unreasonable under common law, and the officers have quoted some instances here to try to enforce that condition. So as such, that will not be taking place. However, the entire frontage of this subdivision will have a footpath.
Thank you, Councillor. I may have to go to the seconder and just come back to you on the summing up, and you can finish your report at the end. Otherwise, we could go all night. Is that okay?
I won't go all night.
I'm going to want to give you a voice arrest, that's all, Councillor.
All right, okay.
And I'll come back to you in the summing up, at the summing up of this item. Is that okay? Councillor Ross, seconder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for that very detailed report so far, Councillor Brown. I too, went down to visit the site, looking at the objections, and raised the issue with Councillor Brown about Vic Roads and the access from the main road there. With the deferment, we had information come back in conditions that satisfied us that that would be covered. I must say, without going into all of them, there is 35 conditions and there are 71 sub-clause conditions connected to the 35 conditions. What happens is, with these sort of applications, if council were to reject them and the application was to get passed at VCAT, often you have very little or no conditions put on an application. So to finish up with 35 conditions with 71 sub-clauses of the conditions to comply with as the developer, they have a whole lot of work to do on their end to satisfy council and the residents that it will be built as prescribed in the conditions. So with this, by council, if council chooses to pass this, they have got assurance that there is a whole lot of work there to be done. Anyway, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers on this subject? Back to you, Councillor Brown, to sum up. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm sorry if you think I've been rambling too long, but I haven't been. I respect the people, that they need the answers to these objections that they put forward, and I'll finish them if you don't mind. The addition of the new intersection to cause traffic issues, people are very, very concerned with the conditions. We'll have vehicles entering and exiting from this area. But as I said before, we have Vic Roads complete approval, and there is no suggestion at all of there being danger. And sewerage is not an issue because that will be provided. The owners, the objectors, did not think it would. And in conclusion, Mayor, the proposed application is consistent with state and local planning policy and the zone and overlay provisions that apply to the subject site. The application has been assessed against the relevant policy and it's been determined that the application satisfactorily complies with the vision for the area and should be supported. Therefore, it's recommended issues a notice of decision, and thank you for having concerns for my health. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Brown. All those in favour? For? Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item 3. The Lakeside Discovery Centre at Emerald Lake Park, as withdrawn by Councillor Jeff Springfield. Councillor Springfield, to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm just going to quickly babble for a little bit because my laptop just shut down my actual words I need to use in order to construct this. But I can talk briefly as I pull this together nice and quickly. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council 1. Note the heads of agreement document with Emerald Tourist Railway Board has been executed. 2. Proceed with the sale of 8,068 square metres of land at Emerald Lake Park, shown as Lot 1 of PS 829353T, to the Emerald Tourist Railway Board for the valuation to be set by the Victorian Valuer General to allow construction of the Lakeside Discovery Centre. 3. Use the proceeds from the sale to provide improvements to both Emerald Lake Park and Puffing Billy Place Reserve in Emerald. And 4. Note that this sale is in accordance with Section 191 of the Local Government Act 1989.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilmot. Can I have back to you, Councillor Jeff Springfield? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I note that we have the CEO of Puffing Billy Railway right here, so thank you for coming down, Steve. So look, this has been in the pipe works for a while, the Discovery Centre at Emerald Lake Park, and so I'm pleased that we're getting this towards its finalisation of getting some tools in the ground and moving forward, and this is one of the final steps needed to happen from council's point of view, and also I'm happy towards the opportunity that we can now provide some further information to our residents who have been asking many questions about this, and especially in regards to the sale of the land. So, and there's been a number of times residents have been asking about what is happening in this space, and so until now we haven't really had the detailed information to be able to provide that to them, but moving forward, we now can. And so I'm pleased to say that we are selling this parcel of land to allow for this construction to happen, but the proceeds from this sale will be going back into improvements within the park and at Puffing Billy Place up in Emerald. So, which I think is a great outcome. I think this is a good outcome for all parties involved here. There's been a lot of negotiation happening from our officers and the staff at Puffing Billy in order to find the best outcome for this project moving forward, and I believe that we've got there from the hard work they've done, so congratulations to all the staff involved putting this together. But I believe we are moving in the right direction, and this is going to be a great outcome for the future of Puffing Billy, as well as the council and as well as Emerald Lake Park as a whole. I'll just mention a few things from the report here. So the heads of agreement has documented several things. It may be a bit of a mystery what a heads of agreement could be, but just to outline, it's working out the process between the access of the Emerald Tourist Railway Board and its contractors, consultants and agents to the Emerald Lake and Emerald Lake Park for the purpose of the construction of the Discovery Centre and the construction of the car park. It's working out the construction of the car park on behalf of council by the ETRB. Work out the process for the relocation of certain assets in Emerald Lake Park that need to be moved due to the construction of this site. And I think most importantly, it's to note the increased contribution by the Emerald Tourist Railway Board to the maintenance costs associated with the assets in Emerald Lake Park. And on the basis that Emerald Lake Park will be and its facilities will be used by the Puffing Billy Railway patrons, as well as our council residents, as well as tourists from all across that want to come and visit our great Shire. So I think there's many positives towards this. So I'm happy to see this finally come ahead and move forward in the right direction. Thank you, Mayor.
Well said, Councillor Springfield. Thank you. To the seconder is Councillor Wilmot. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Springfield, for your words, and particularly around the heads of agreement and clarifying those points. I also just wanted to thank the staff that have been negotiating with Puffing Billy Railway over a period of time now in getting the details of this plan right. They've negotiated some really good positive outcomes which are outlined in the report here. In particular, I wanted to note the reduction in the number of trees that will be removed for the building of this. I think that's a very good outcome. I think there's a number of us around this table know how touchy Emerald community get when you're removing trees from public places. We've experienced the backlash of that ourselves at times. So I think it's very important that we've been able to reduce that number of trees. It'll have a positive result for the community. I do note, though, that there is still a lot of community concern about the traffic on Emerald Lake Road. So I think, again, that's an area that we need to be very, very clear and communicating really well with the residents, particularly once this starts to be built. There will be extra trucks on that road delivering materials and so forth, and the residents, particularly along that road, need to be kept up to speed on exactly what's going on and what they should be expecting. It is very important that this goes ahead now. It's been talked about for a lot of years. Puffing Billy is certainly one of the most important assets we have as a Shire in the form of tourism. They bring a lot of people to our Shire each and every day of the year, and that's a very positive thing for tourism. They might not necessarily stop in Emerald along the way and spend their dollars there, but they pass through Emerald and see the beautiful countryside that we have in our Shire, and they may come back another day and visit and spend their money in our townships. So it's very important that we have a good relationship with Puffing Billy, and it'll be a good outcome for Puffing Billy having something there for their passengers to do on wet, horrible days, and we've certainly had our share of those over the last couple of weeks, so I'm sure that they'll be very keen to get this up and running. There's nothing worse than going to Emerald Lake Park on a wet, rainy day and seeing lots of very soggy, wet tourists running around not knowing what to do. So it'll be a good thing for all of them, and certainly for the community as well. There'll be some jobs created through this development, so that'll be a lovely opportunity for people as well. And I shall leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Colin Ross. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just looking at this development, this has been a long time coming. I know a lot of people have worked on it for a long time. I do see that there's $15.7 million being put in by the state and federal governments, which is a very large amount of money towards this project. Council, as it was pointed out, will provide some land out of the park, and the $15.7 million would probably go towards the purchase of the land and also the development of the centre itself. I must say this is a great addition to our tourism network, and we've had plenty of money coming in at the moment with Puffing Billy, as you can see there, with the 15.7 million, and you've got other places like Gumbaya World that have invested heavily. I think it should be noted too that in in Gippsland, there was something like an 18% increase in tourism in the last year, the largest of any area in Victoria. So this will be a wonderful addition, adding to that amount of people visiting our great Shire. I must say too, as Councillor Wilmot pointed out, local employment will increase, and they had some targets to look to support existing businesses and new businesses. I must say one of the attractive things to council was the fact that there will be, as part of the Discovery Centre, an education portion to this where schools will be able to visit. And instead of Puffing Billy being something where you get to winter time and it gets really cold and wet, there'll actually be a really good destination when you get to Emerald Lake Park, where people can get out, enjoy the ride on the train and do something undercover. I must say our facilities that sit there at the moment, to say the least, are dated. I don't think there's a whole lot of attraction there for people other than probably to hop off when it's really wet, cold and rainy but to want to get back on the train and continue on their journey. But this will hopefully be a really great stop. And what it will do is hopefully develop the end out to the east, down to Gembrook a bit more too, because as it develops further, people will come to Emerald Lake Park and probably want to go on the rest of the journey. So I think this is a wonderful thing. It's been a long time coming, and I hope Council will support this. And I thank Puffing Billy for being persistent and working on this issue. I think Councillor Wilmot pointed out the result with the trees. I think it's around about a third of the trees we're going to be looked to be changed and removed and replaced in other places. So anyway, I'll leave it there and leave the opportunity for other councillors to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other councillors to comment? Yeah, of course, Councillor B Owen. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'll thank my ward colleagues and Councillor Ross, and I don't want to repeat, but what they said was fantastic. I just wanted to highlight Puffing Billy's intention to improve the experience for people of all abilities, whether you've got a disability, and its intention for access for all. And I'm really pleased as part of this Discovery Centre, they are installing a Changing Places toilet facility. And this will be the second one in our Shire. Deep Creek will be the first one. And this Changing Places facility will be part of this Discovery Centre. And this is really important for people that have got high complex disabilities. At the moment, currently, I think if you've got a disability, your experience on Puffing Billy is limited because of the carriages and so forth like that. So my understanding when Puffing Billy have briefed us previously is that they are wanting to improve the experience for access for all. And that is fantastic that this Discovery Centre will deliver this Changing Places change room and toilet facility. For those people who don't know what a Changing Places facility is, it is that high-end enhanced standard in relation to a toilet and changing place. So I congratulate them. I do once again want to reiterate what my ward councillors have said, the use of proceeds from the sale to provide improvements to both Emerald Lake Park and Puffing Billy Place Reserve in Emerald. So every dollar, every cent from the sale of this land will go back into either Emerald Lake Park or Puffing Billy Place, the park in Kilvington Drive in Emerald. So I think that is very clear for residents to have an understanding where this money, the proceeds, will go back into those two locations. So this will be great for Emerald, great for our Shire, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor B Owen. Any other speakers on this subject? Nope. Before I go back to Councillor Springfield, I congratulate everybody. What a great outcome. It's just great to see everybody happy in the same room. I think it's really great result to think of the community. Puffing Billy themselves as a great organisation. The councillors all working together as partnerships. After some negotiation, we get to this point, and I think it's a fantastic outcome, and I'm only too pleased to be involved with it as well. So I'll pass on back to the mover, Councillor Jeff Springfield, to sum up. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to everyone in their comments towards this. It has been a long process, and our officers have put in a lot of work, again, to find the best outcome from this project, to deliver the best outcome for the residents and for Puffing Billy, and find that balance between all of it. There's been probably the main concern from the residents has been the impact on the park, and some people would like to have it as it stays, keep it as it is, but what we've negotiated is a minimal amount of impact, a great reduction in the proposed vegetation removal from the start, and changing the plans towards the car park in order to deliver the least amount of vegetation disruption, and so it's now a plan that sits comfortably with myself, and I believe with the rest of my colleagues here, that it is ideal moving forward. It's a great thing to be able to invest $15+ million on a project within the township that I live, and I do hope that it is well utilised by tourists and local residents. in all, in total, when it's once it commences, and I believe it will be. So I look forward to that day. And again, I thank you, Steve, for coming down and for the good work you're putting in towards making Puff and Billy relevant for the future. You know, beyond what it has just been in the past. So great work there. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. All those will signify in the usual manner. All those for? Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6, we move on to the collective submission to the Royal Commission into Mental Health as withdrawn by Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. The collective submission to the Royal Commission into Mental Health, reference INT 1960440. Recommendation that the submission made by Cardinia Shire Council and partnering organisations for the Royal Commission into mental health be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Michael Schilling. Thank you, Councillor. Back to you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. This is a very important subject that communities all around need to talk about, and I'm about to talk about it. It's something that I began and was very passionate about when I was elected into council. So it has taken 3 years to get it to this stage. And I'm very proud of the staff that I've worked with and the partnerships that we've established. So I hope I won't bore you on it. The Victorian Royal Commission into Mental Health is the first of its kind in Australia, and one that provides an opportunity to improve the health and social outcomes of those living with mental illness. On Tuesday, the 18th of June, 8 mental health service agencies from Cardinia Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group, including Uniting, Each, Monash Health, Windermere, Ways, Irma, Wellways and Cardinia Shire and myself met to a workshop and drafted a collective submission of Royal Commission to the mental health. The remaining 6 agencies, which I'll mention a little bit later, that are formed with the Cardinia Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group, but did not contribute to the collective submission, have made their own individual submissions, which I will be as well making my own personal submission. Mental Health Victoria played a particular role in assisting with the submission by providing feedback on the draft document and providing advice and support through the process of development. The submission provided a comprehensive local insight into response to the terms of reference. Background. The Cardinia Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group was established in 2018 to advocate, cooperate and deliver on a collective action plan consisting of 10 community actions or projects to achieve over a 3-year term. Members include senior management level representation from Wellways, Mind Australia, Each, Southern Migrant and Refugee Centre, Victorian Police, Ways, Windermere, Mental Health, Victoria, Irma, Uniting, Monash Health, NDIA and the Department of Health and Human Services. The Cardinia Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group welcomed Angus Cleardon, CEO of Mental Health Victoria, who we were very, very lucky to encourage to join us. And so he is on the team with us and is giving a very, very informative information and insight into state government direction on mental health and the related concepts and policies. Mental Health Victoria support the work of the Cardinia Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group for fostering cooperation, lending to the opportunity and positive outcomes. It comes under our livable plan, of the 2017 to 2029, set in the strategic direction for improving health and wellbeing across the Shire for the next 12 years. Mental health specifically is one of the most sufficient priorities within the Livable Plan, as well as social cohesion, safety, obesity, family violence, financial vulnerability, drug and alcohol and gambling harm, all of which can be directed related to mental health. Access to a variety of services for all. This is our relevant plan, council plan. Access to support services and programs for young people. Improve health and wellbeing for all. Our diverse community requires increased levels of community participation, improved health and wellbeing of our residents. In consultation and communication, consultation with this submission included a variety of both internal and external groups and networking. Internally, the youth services and maternal child health teams contributed to the submission, focusing on these particular areas in providing local specific insight into response to the terms of reference. Cardinia's Mental Health Alliance was established in 2017 with the objective of providing a platform for local mental health service providers to work cooperatively, that's a word, isn't it, towards improving mental health and wellbeing outcomes for residents of Cardinia Shire. The Alliance consists of membership from more than 30 different organisations and strategic action plans consisting of 13 actions over a 3-year term. The Community Workers and Shire Network is one of our largest network and more than 80 members. The purpose of the network is to bring together a range of skills, knowledge, promote efficiency, innovation and improve community outcomes with the objectives including integrated planning and partnerships, advisory, advocacy and information sharing network. Members have opportunity to share and participate in the community of this practice setting. Financial and resource implications, nil. The collective submission of the Royal Commission to Mental Health was submitted on the Friday the 5th of July, and the Cardinia Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group have requested to speak on this report, which we will be waiting once we get notification. Now, all of you councillors would have received the collective submission information, so I hope you have read it and have your thoughts on it. Now, the police are part of this. They find it's very important. They deal with people with mental health and mental health and wellbeing issues within our community, and we're glad to see that they're on board with us. 52% identify mental health issues as one of the main safety and injury concerns. Mental health in Cardinia Shire. Along with the influx of new residents, many of our residents, both urban and rural, are facing hardships. Due to the Shire location, many residents are experiencing long commutes to employment and social services. The cost of living, the cost of petrol, the cost of services is quite a worry. I'm not going to read right through it because it's quite a lengthy report, and I feel that, we've been going on quite a bit, but this is a really important report. The main challenges relating to mental health in Cardinia Shire. Many of the mental health challenges experienced in Cardinia Shire, inadequate infrastructure, especially for mental health and other communities, transport options and affordable housing, insufficient services, especially those early intervention services, infrastructure and services not keeping pace with the rapid population, Residents also face barriers to accessing services because of financial vulnerability and cultural and diversity. For a service for someone with a mental health to see a psychiatrist is $100 a pop. And that's quite a lot of money. And their medication can cost up to between $600 and $800. And a lot of people on pension cannot afford this. Some of the mental health issues are drug related, and the percentage of drug and alcohol clients are up to 1,000 in the population.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, what I'll do, I might have to go to the seconder for the moment.
Okay,
you
and I'll
can,
come back.
When you come back at the sum up, you can
Sum up.
talk for a bit longer if you want and give you something to speak about in the sum up. Is that okay, Councillor?
Yes, thank you.
Can I go to the seconder, Councillor Michael Schilling? Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ryan, for your ongoing advocacy in this particular topic. I think councillors all should be noting your passion and ongoing commitment to working towards ensuring better mental health services for the broader Cardinia community. Councillor Ryan spoke about the Royal Commission into mental health, and as far as I'm concerned, it's something that couldn't happen soon enough. In Cardinia, we're simply at breaking point when it does come to accessible services for those people living with a mental illness. And this is reinforced by some of the data that Councillor Ryan did highlight in her first report. She mentioned the fractured public transport network, which is ever so true. Also the fact that 19 to almost 20% of our community have a reduced capacity due to psychological distress. And that's compared to metropolitan Melbourne, where it's sitting at 15%. So we're already, compared to Metro Melbourne, already much worse off. We also have some big problems with our housing stock, particularly for single lone people. Research that we have done as a council shows that 70+% of our housing stock are 3-4 bedroom houses, which doesn't leave much capacity for cheaper accommodation for people. I would like to congratulate the Health and Wellbeing Strategic Leadership Group on their submission to the Royal Commission, and I believe the evidence provided along with the localised recommendations which they have highlighted in the report will go a long way in highlighting the challenges that we face as a municipality. The submission will also provide the Royal Commission with some accurate insights to the service upgrades we'll require if we want to see improvements to the provision of mental health services in the Shire, and it's through ongoing advocacy through this group and through councillors like Councillor Ryan that will make this a reality in the community. Reading the submission, and I've read it a few times, what really stands out to me is the holistic lens that this report actually places on our community. It doesn't just talk about reactive frontline services, throw money at crisis intervention, which of course is needed, but it also addresses barriers to people being able to access these localised services. And we all know it's basic health planning that there's a correlation between connected communities and positive health outcomes. So whilst as a council we are working incredibly hard to make sure this happens, tackling an issue as big as mental health in our community does need a multi-government, multidisciplinary approach to make it happen. So once again, I do commend this report, and I am more than happy to support Councillor Ryan in the work that she's doing in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Jodie Owen.
Yeah, congratulations, Councillor Ryan. I think you're doing some absolutely wonderful work. I just want to mention a couple of things that sort of popped out to me in the report, and that is the fact that at the moment we're sitting with psychologists at being 49% lower than in Metro Melbourne. Occupational therapists, we're 78% lower than Metro Melbourne. Pharmacists, 62% lower than Metro Melbourne, and psychotherapists, 23% lower than Metro Melbourne. I think the important thing with mental health is that it is known roughly to affect 1 in 4 people. So we can look around this room and sort of realise that probably sitting here this evening there are people who've had troubling times. Mental illness is not something we should hide from. It is no different from having a broken leg or a broken arm. Sadly, over the years, it's just really copped a bad whack and people just don't understand it. And I really want to say to Councillor Ryan, prior to the Family Violence Royal Commission, people thought we couldn't change family violence figures within the state. Well, we did, and we can do that with mental health as well. So well done, and congratulations on your work and that of the rest of our team.
Thank you, Councillor Jodie Owen. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll just quickly echo the comments of the prior two speakers and congratulate Councillor Ryan on her work in here. It's very obvious when you speak you have a real passion for this, and I thank you for your work in this area, because it is a really important area, and unfortunately it's an area that doesn't get spoken about because there is a stigma attached to it, and I think it's really important that we are speaking about it and hopefully breaking down some of that stigma. I've read through the report, and as I was reading through the report, I noticed that one of the barriers is the fact that all the services currently are located in Dandenong, and there's very few services out here. And that got me thinking, so I did a little bit of research, and as you all know, I live in Cockatoo. For me to get to, if a resident in Cockatoo, to get to Dandenong on public transport will take them the best part of 2 hours one way. So that's a huge barrier for anybody that's living in our rural communities, and I can imagine that Lang Lang, Cooey-Rup are probably in similar positions. Maryknoll and the townships out that way would be in exactly the same position. And whilst this is a great report, I don't think those issues are addressed in this report, so I hope that if you get to speak at the Commission, you recognise that the rural townships also need to have services provided. I note that the last recommendation in this report is the central hub, which is a great idea, and that would be a really good start to making life a little bit easier to get to those sorts of services. It's only about a 50-minute trip from Cockatoo to Pakenham on public transport, so that's a halfway improvement. That's pretty good. But if we can have the services located centrally in Pakenham, there's the opportunity to do outreach services from Pakenham and provide services into those rural areas, and that would be a really good outcome for our communities. So again, I congratulate you and the whole advisory group that you've got put together there. You've got some really good, important players around the table, and I congratulate you on the work you're doing in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Any other speakers on this subject? Before I go back to Councillor Ryan, would like to say and apologise. I understand that you're very, very passionate about this item, and I can understand why you get involved in the in this whole program. It's a very important subject. It's an important issue within our community, and also I'd like to see a hub here, even at the Monash Health on top of the hill there. Be nice to see that extended for going there. Would be closer than going to Dandenong and back, and I commend you and your team for this report, because it's a great report to read, and I just forward this on to the gallery and the community to read this as well, because it's a great document, and I know that you've had a lot of input into this area. So back to you, Councillor Ryan, but Councillor Colin Ross wants to talk for a while as well. Thank you, Councillor Colin Ross. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to continue painting the picture that the fellow councillors have painted, in Cardinia Shire we have 15% of adults experiencing high to very high psychological distress, compared to 12.5% of Victorians. And in fact, 8% of adults are unable to work, study or manage day-to-day activities due to psychological distress. We've got 19% of adults have reduced work, study, day-to-day activities, and also Cardinia Shire has the highest rate of overnight hospitalisations for depressive episodes in the southern metropolitan region. So there is an absolute demand out there for better services, and as Councillor Jodie Owen pointed out, and I think she must have suffered from what I do quite often where I don't wear my glasses, it actually is even far worse when you have a look at the need for services and the gaps that we have in Cardinia Shire. It's actually, and psychologists, we are 94.49% less than the metropolitan Melbourne area for these services. So the gaps are really big, and I must say, I commend this submission going in. I think it really does highlight the urgent need, And it is very true, as people pointed out. Quite often, Cardinia Shire gets lumped in a submission with funding for some things with Dandenong, Casey and Cardinia. And they deliver most of the services in Dandenong. Casey gets some, and by the time you get out to Cardinia Shire, we've got that many limited services out here. They just don't deliver out here. So our residents have to travel the furthest. And as it was pointed out by Councillor Wilmot, and that's only just really looking at the urban growth boundary. You go outside of there and it's even more difficult for people to access the services. So I commend this submission and go back to you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I didn't see you there, and I apologise wholeheartedly. Back to you, Councillor Carol Ryan. You can see there's a lot of support in the room for you, Councillor, and I can understand why. But back to you to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you again through you, Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues. I value your input and I value your support. A lot of you all know that I'm passionate about it. I worked in the area over 40 years, and I also have a family member that has a mental illness. So from both sides, and experiencing from not only a worker's point of view, but from a family member's point of view, and the struggle that is put on you from when they're released from hospital within 2 weeks. You're there having to deal with it, and sometimes friends don't always want to be around. So there are a lot of issues. On addressing Councillor Wilmot, yes, we did discuss distance, and one of the comments was people from Dandenong wouldn't travel this far for services, so why should we? And that's one of our arguments that we will use in the within the Commission. Part of the Royal Commission too is to prove that we have reason to have these services here. And part of the services as well is that with the Royal Commission, they want to choose 8 areas that they would support and help with the partnership with Council and other partnerships within. And so our aim is to prove that there is a need here, and it's been needed for a long time. We are the forgotten area, we are a growth area, and the passion is that we need to recognise the issues first in what really is the problems within our Shire, and then we put it into a submission and then we put it forward. So again, the whole team has worked so intensely, and to even have the Victorian Mental Health CEO on board with us is absolutely wonderful, because every other council wants him now, and well, it's too bad because we got him first. But he gives us good insight into how the state and federal works on these matters. And I think some of the services with this would be looking at after hours services, because sometimes when the GP is not available, and they're usually the first point of call. So we're looking at GPs to be within the area that would be available as well. We've also looked at social workers, peer workers, psychologists, vocational workers, family support workers, social inclusion and cultural workers, drug and alcohol workers, practice nurses, mental health nurses, occupational therapists, neurologists. So there's a lot more involved in this. So it would be great if it went out to the public so that they could read what's involved in this submission. And all we can do is keep advocating and keep fighting for what the needs are for the people in our community. And the most vulnerable people within our community are seniors and our veterans. And sometimes we forget about them. And so I'm going to, and there's 1 in 4 that does suffer some sort of mental health issue. And I suppose to finalise my summary up of taking so long is that let's break down the stigma that surrounds mental health. Mental health has no preference as to who it can affect. It doesn't have a preference to age, it doesn't have a preference to gender, it doesn't have a preference to culture or religion. It is a chemical imbalance of the brain function. It's a chronic illness. And with being diagnosed with the right services within our community and monitoring and medication and affordable services, then that's what we need for our people in our community. And I will be fighting as hard as I can to get this down this area so that we value what needs to be here. And I'll finish on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Good finish, Councillor Ryan. Well done. So I will signify in the usual manner. All those for it? For? Carried. Well done. Thank you. Item 9. Appointment of the committee members to the Heritage Park Emerald Museum Committee of Management, as withdrawn by Councillor Owen. Thank you, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the following appointments be made to the Nobelius Heritage Park and Emerald Museum Committee of Management for a 2-year term. Pauline Murphy, President; Lynn Schroll, Secretary; Manny Porter, Treasurer; Elaine Morris; Roy Kendall; Chris Scarlett; and Kerry Champness. I move so.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilmot. Back to you, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Sorry, Lynn, if I mispronounce your surname. But I just want to acknowledge, obviously, a number of councillors went to that biennial meeting. Councillor Springfield, Councillor Wilmot, our Mayor, chaired the election of committee bearers, and myself was there. But it was a really, really good meeting, and once again we see a really great committee elected. It was only 2 years ago that we were fearful as a group of councillors that we may not see a committee elected because we had a number of retirements. But once again we saw the committee step up, and we've got a full committee. It's great to see a number of descendants on this committee of the Nobelius family, and I believe Pauline, Lynn, and I think Elaine Morris, are all descendants of Mr. Nobelius, in which the museum and the Heritage Park obviously has a strong history about. So I understand our CEO recently attended a meeting recently, so that was really great. But it was great to get an update of the 2 years of achievements, and they are doing so well. They've embraced their museum officer, which is a council employee, Melissa. She does a great job. They've had a number of exhibitions, including World War I armistice displays, displays on walking canes, I believe, also agricultural sort of items. Their visitors have increased enormously. They're seeing large community groups come to the museum, and they've got issues with buses getting in under the historic heritage sort of vegetation, and we're working through them, but they're just doing amazing work. They're applying for council community capital works grants. They got a beautification grant recently in relation to putting nameplates on trees within the park. So I just want to acknowledge the commitment of the election of the new committee. Thank the outgoing members. There is a number of retirements, particularly a long-term committee member, Kerry Williams, who served on this committee for well over 30 years, and that was acknowledged with a gift and acknowledgement. But I believe there's a memorial award in his honour that the museum gives out to appropriate sort of members and volunteers. So thank you. I just want to acknowledge those committee members and the many volunteers. There are many volunteers. Beryl, I think everyone knows Beryl. She's passionate about the museum, and she's worked there a long time as well. So thank you to the committee and the volunteers.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Second to speak, Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very brief. Councillor Owen has covered it beautifully, but I do want to pass on my thanks to the outgoing committee, particularly Kerry Williams. He's been an absolute stalwart, and the work he's done in the park itself is incredible over a very long period of time. But I believe he's retired because he's planning on moving out of the district, so that's a huge loss to our communities. But I'd also like to thank the incoming committee. some of them have been on there already for the last 2 years, and they've put their hand up for a further 2. So it's a big commitment, volunteering for a 2-year term on a committee. It's hard enough sometimes getting commitment for a 1-year committee term. So I congratulate those people, and I look forward to seeing their next exhibitions. They've had some rippers over the years, and the walking cane exhibition was a great exhibition. I really enjoyed that one, so I'm looking forward to the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Any other speakers on this subject? No other speakers. I was actually proud to be there, councillors, with you and sharing the museum's AGM. It was really a great night. It was really good fun to go and do. So I'll go back to you, Councillor B Owen. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. I just want to really promote the museum and the Nobelius Heritage Park. It's amazing still some residents of the Shire do not know we have this great asset. You know, it's surprising that the museum members were telling me on this night that there's still people in Emerald that don't know that we have such a great facility, and that's why Council is working with them in improving signage. You know, they definitely would like to see improved signage around the site and along the trail and along the main roads to really sort of direct tourists and residents to this great museum. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor B Owen. All those councillors in favour for 4? Carried. Thank you. Item 15. We've got a couple of notice of motions this evening. And item 15 is notice of motion 1046 as withdrawn by Councillor Michael Schilling. Councillor Schilling, to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to move the following notice of motion. In order to create connected and livable communities, it's essential that residents have access to local services and infrastructure. This includes the provision of adequate public transport connections, ensuring that residents are not isolated from essential services and local opportunities. Currently, the public transport connections for those living in Cardinia Grove Estate in Pakenham and Gold Care Lifestyle Village in Pakenham are limited, resulting in residents having to walk unreasonable distances to the nearest bus stop. This isolation is against Cardinia's livability standards. Therefore, Council resolves to 1. Write to the Minister for Transport and Public Transport Victoria seeking a reroute to the 925 bus service to include Orchard Valley Avenue, Tumac Valley Road and Syme Road in Pakenham. I have inserted an additional point into this notice of motion which I spoke to the governance manager this afternoon, and that is to request Public Transport Victoria review the bus network within Cardinia Shire, ensuring local schools are serviced with adequate bus services to accommodate their relevant catchment area, and finally to continue to advocate for improved bus services throughout the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jodie Owen. Back to you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the residents of Gold Care Lifestyle Village in Pakenham, led by Joe, who brought this issue to my attention. And of course, this is about local residents from the Lifestyle Village and Cardinia Grove Estate not having access to bus services. And sadly, this problem is not unique in Cardinia. As we see rapid growth across the Shire, up to 6 families moving in a day, we're forever seeing a lack of essential infrastructure keeping up with our growing community. We've just been speaking about access to mental health services. The way you can guarantee poor health outcomes for community is by not having infrastructure to facilitate the movement of people across the Shire. And for that reason, services such as well-planned public transport should be available for communities from day dot. Luckily for the residents that I'm referring to in this notice of motion specifically, there is a very simple alteration that can be made to the current bus service that would provide them access to a local bus. That is the 925, which currently stops at Balmoral Way. And by including Orchard Valley Road, Tumac Valley Road and Syme Road would ensure these residents can actually access this bus. And given our ongoing issues with public transport in the Shire, I've included in this notice of motion that we should continue to advocate for improved bus services throughout the Cardinia Shire, because it is important to stay ahead of the game before we create a problem that never needed to exist. That second point that I mentioned in my introduction around making sure that local schools have bus services in their catchment areas, that is, as new estates are built, we don't have bus infrastructure going through these estates. So you have a whole heap of school students who are unable to get to school without either going by car or having to walk incredible distances. So by having that review will be really important to make sure that we can foster good public transport habits amongst the young people in the Shire. Now, the points I've made tonight are consistent with our livability plan, which aims to improve social cohesion, mental wellbeing, and also improve safety. And of course, that livability plan is a much bigger document than just that. But a big piece of the puzzle to making sure that we can achieve any livability standard is access to community services. And of course, public transport is key in ensuring that this access can occur. Councillor Ryan and myself went down to the retirement village the other day and did a little bit of advocacy work. And I have noticed since that we've put this on the agenda, we've actually opened up a much bigger conversation. And to be honest, it was much bigger than I expected it to be around public transport, but in particular having interconnecting buses and having regular bus stops for our residents to use. So over the coming weeks, Councillor Ryan and I will be doing some work on surveying some of our residents around where those missing spots are, so then we can then do some advocacy work to Public Transport Victoria, because whilst councils aren't responsible for public transport, it's a state government priority, we do at the end of the day have some bargaining power and the ability to advocate for improved services. So look, I hope my fellow colleagues around the table will support this tonight, seeking this review and seeking this letter to Public Transport Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. Councillor Jodie Owen to second, please.
Sorry, Councillor Ryan, I won't be long because I know you were meant to second, so I do apologise. Just real briefly, I also want to put into this another part of this notice of motion, which I think is important. When you're looking at some of the areas where these buses are not going, or even in areas where they are going, the bus stops themselves are absolutely appalling. Some of them have no seats, some of them have no cover. There's a fun game that Berwick secondary students get to play on Friday night, and that is Let's Crush Miss Owen. Because what happens is at Berwick Secondary we have one bus, and if you do not get on the Pakenham bus, which usually means crushing me into a door some way, you then have to walk down to the highway, and the kids can sit there for an hour and a half waiting to get a bus to then wait for another connecting bus in Pakenham to get home. So we all know that we are having rapid growth out here. Everybody can see it. It's no secret anymore. I'm so wholeheartedly behind my colleagues in saying that the Victorian Minister for Transport needs to not just worry about removing level crossings, but also needs to start wondering what's happening to our buses and why our people are being left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jodie Owen. Thank you very much. Any other speakers on this subject? Oh, Councillor Ryan, of course. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Yes, on this subject of buses in particular, yes, Councillor Schilling and myself did go on a little bit of a tour, taking photos and just assessing Central Ward and the bus services and bus shelters and the state of where people have to stand sometimes. I think the concerning area that we were looking at in this particular day was appalling how far someone would have to walk to the next bus stop. And when you're looking at seniors from that, from, what is it, Gold Coast. Not Gold Coast, sorry. I think I need new glasses myself, don't I? Yes, in Cardinia Grove Estate. Yeah, it's a retirement village. And, you know, I think I myself probably wouldn't walk to the next bus stop. I'd probably turn around and go back inside, which could cause isolation for people that really need to get out and enjoy life and not be restricted by limited bus services. My also concerned about bus services within our community and our growing community. It's not keeping up with the timing. I mean, to catch a bus, it's every hour. That's just not sufficient anymore. It was when we were a smaller township, but it's not anymore as far as the growth happens. And it's not just, seniors I'm thinking of. That, there's youth that go to sports that rely on transport, or whether they've got to travel to catch up with their mates. They can't always rely on someone that drives, and not every family has a car in their within that unity of family environment. So I will support you, Councillor Schilling, on your motion in advocating and writing a letter to the Minister for Transport to try and advocate and our MP for Bass, as we were talking to Jordan today. We were in her ear about transport and what's happening, so we need to keep advocating on that behalf every time we catch up with her. So she'll love hearing this one. But thank you very much, Mayor. I do support this motion.
Well done, Councillor Ryan. Any other speakers on this subject? Or Councillor Wilmot? Then we've got down the other side then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to just thank Councillor Schilling for adding in the dot point that he did about asking for a review of the school buses. I had a resident in Timbertop speak to me last week about the fact that the Education Department has rezoned the high schools. So the way it was, students from Timbertop Estate had Berwick College zoned as their high school, their closest high school. They've just done a review, and now the Officer College down here is their zoned school. So children from Timbertop will be recommended to attend that Officer campus as their government school, state school. But there's no buses there. There's no buses that run from Timbertop to that school. So she spoke to me. She's already spoken to State MP Brad Batten, and she's also written to the Education Minister and the Minister for Transport as well. So she's advocating hard, and I think it's really important that we as a council support our residents in these sorts of initiatives. She's certainly got the ball and she's running with it at the moment, but if we can offer our support as a council, I think that's a really positive thing for our residents. So thank you, Councillor Schilling.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Brown.
To the table to discuss the provision of the bus service down Kooyrup Lang Lang Way, and unfortunately we haven't been able to get them to come to the table. It's got to a situation now where perhaps we need to take this action and write to the Minister and sort of in some way sort of plead and say that we really do need these services. In respect to bus stops, a classic example of a school bus is Lang Lang, where they moved the school bus from the sheltered area to Dick Jones's Park with no shelter, for no reason at all. I challenged it and they were told that it was because of the safety of the children and they wouldn't enter any more discussion. Now I think that as a council, I think we really should get involved in this now. It's just as important, I think, as crossings and footpaths and those types of things, that we really look at this and the appropriateness of bus stops and buses and where the need is. We had a Transport Connections group some 10 years ago, I think, was the last time that we looked at this thing. I looked at it as part of the Township Committee in Kooyrup, and as a result of that, we got that restricted service we now have between Kooyrup. So I think that if we get some commitment and we get some passion from within the council and the officers here, I think we can achieve good things. So well done to Councillor Schilling for the motion, and I support it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor B Owen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all the other councillors for talking. I definitely support your motion, Councillor Schilling. The issue of buses has been talked about by this council in recent times. There's been reports about the railway station car parks, particularly Beaconsfield, and the need for council to advocate for improvements to bus services. So already there is resolutions of council and council reports, with this intention. This morning, I caught a bus. My car was getting repaired, and I had to get to Narre Warren this morning. So it was quite timely. So I got up at 6, left my front door at 6, and I'm lucky. I live in the urban area, which does have some sort of bus network. But I still had to walk 18 minutes to a bus stop to the Princess Highway in Beaconsfield, and that was okay. Even though our urban areas have bus networks, there is still long distance to travel. And it's fair to say I'm an able-bodied person that was walking quite quickly to the bus for my 6:21 bus along the highway. So I got to Narre Warren at shortly after 6:30. But we do need to improve connections. There's a closer bus to me, but the time you would get that bus to wait at a railway station to get to the train, there is long delays. And my understanding is there has not been a real review in public transport buses for many, many years. So this is long overdue. We need a better service. It's sad. I got on the bus, there was 2 other people. People aren't using the service because it's unreliable, long delays. We've got people who can't get a car park at the Beaconsfield railway station after 7 a.m. You're parking in a residential street, which has adverse impacts on residents. Because the buses systems do not connect with the railway station, timetable in an appropriate time frame for people to get to work, get to school. So we need improvement. So I support this notice of motion. It does support council's long intention in relation to improvements to the bus service through other reports. So I do support so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Red Owen. Any other speakers on the subject? Councillor Ross.
10 days, I support this motion, and as Councillor Owen said, expanding this even further, and Councillor Brown said to other areas in Cardinia Shire. 10 days ago, I attended the VLGA, had a free forum on transport, which went for 4 hours on a Friday afternoon, and you had many guest speakers get up to talk about transport. We held the trophy for being the worst public transport delivery area in Metro Melbourne, and we didn't win that just. We won it by a fair bit, which is quite disgraceful. When they pointed out, it's really sad that why would people use public transport when the average waiting time is 45 minutes, and that includes the short time in the morning and the afternoon when it actually comes a little bit quicker. So sometimes you've got to wait over an hour to get these public transport access, particularly buses. With buses, it was pointed out that they are the cheapest and the most responsive application that a government can do. They can actually put these in place quite quickly. You don't have to build big infrastructure like you do with railway. The railways, they say that the infrastructure is the very costly part of it, but once you've actually got the rolling stock and the rails and everything, then it's actually not too bad. But for buses, they can actually just put them on extra routes, they can put extra sessions on. It was actually highlighted that there's a huge problem in Victoria where we have the public transport buses and we have the school buses. And if you actually combine the whole network together, you would have a doubly good bus service. But unfortunately, we don't combine them. They don't talk together, they don't work together. And some of the buses in the morning for schools only get used at that time, and then they just sit there and they don't do anything for the whole rest of the time. They said this is a major problem that a lot of the other areas around the world just don't have. They coordinate the whole system, so people then have a viable network. I thank my fellow councillors for raising this fact. I must say, until probably the last 18 months, we had a huge amount of funding over probably a 7 or 8 year period in Victoria in buses, and none of it came to Cardinia Shire. Disgraceful. But in the last 18 months there has been a little bit more, and I must say when they start citing the fact that we are the worst area, now that we do have some more marginal seats in our area, I'm absolutely certain they will start to take notice and start to do something in the area. Otherwise, the people will jack up. Thank you for this motion. I look forward to expanding it further and looking at what the needs are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any other speakers on the subject? No. Before I go back to the mover, in all respects to you, Councillor Brett Owen, 18 minutes to the bus stop. From the Gold Coast to Pakenham is a lot further than that, I can tell you. So it's been one of those big nights. It's been a big night here, so it's nothing, believe me. Go back to you, Councillor Schilling, to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all the councillors as well for your support on this particular topic. I just want to quickly bring it back to Gold Care Lifestyle Village, on Tumark Valley Road in Pakenham. This is where the motion originally came from. There's some narrative around the residents have done a whole heap of advocacy work. So this isn't the first time it's come up. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And some of the narrative has been around that this village already has a bus, a private bus that people can use. But the disclaimer that I have to say is that it's actually driven by a volunteer who is a resident of the village. So that's not providing accessible, quality public transport for the residents. That's not at all. So look, this motion originally, the first point is specific to people in that catchment, and of course over time it has been expanded, and obviously from the discussion tonight there's a lot more work that we need to do. Look, and I'm not sure what the future of buses will look like in Cardinia. Perhaps there are some more innovative things that Public Transport Victoria can look at. I mean, there have been some trials around using smaller buses, dialer bus services, but these are all things that I think we have to be open to and seeing other ways that we can better utilise the community's resources. All these stories about waiting for buses, we endorsed a document probably about 2 years ago now that spoke about 20-minute communities and residents having access to all essential services within 20 minutes from their house. So waiting on an average, as Councillor Ross said, 45 minutes for a bus, that's not even within our own policy documents. So thanks again, everyone, for supporting this, and I look forward to pushing it out further within the community to try and get some better outcomes and some more sensible transport around Cardinia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schilling. All those for the motion? For? Carried. Notice item number 16. Notice of motion 1047 withdrawn by Councillor Brett Owen. Councillor Brett Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following precursor. The intersection of the Beaconsfield Emerald Road, St George's Road and Salisbury Road, Upper Beaconsfield, which is a Vic Roads controlled intersection, continues to be a safety concern to road users when travelling through the intersection. The Upper Beaconsfield community has been advocating for appropriate and satisfactory changes and improvements since 1983. So I move that. 1. Council write to the Victorian Minister for Roads, the Honourable Jala Pulford, Vic Roads to complete a new review of road safety at the intersection of Beaconsfield Emerald Road, St George's Road and Salisbury Road, Upper Beaconsfield. 2. Respectfully request that modifications are implemented by Vic Roads in consultation with the community and Cardinia Shire Council. 3. Council seek a delegation to Vic Roads to advocate for the above improvements. And 4. Council continue to support and assist the Upper Beaconsfield Association and interested community members to advocate for safety improvements to the intersection. I move so.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jeff Springfield. Back to you, Councillor Brett Owen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Springfield. As I said, this matter has been outstanding, really, since 1983. I want to thank local resident Kate Canizaro and the Upper Beaconsfield Association that has once again raised this issue for discussion and hopefully resolution. As I said, since 1983, a lot of history, A lot of people involved. The issue probably died off a bit, a few years ago after some minor amendments were done in, I think, about 2010. But in the opinion of the community and myself, we believe that there needs to be more improvement. So recently, the General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr. Peter Banazic, has joined myself and interested residents at the intersection. This was discussed at length at the recent Upper Beaconsfield Association meeting. Probably the attendance at that meeting probably tripled because of the interest in relation to this issue. So this notice of motion is really embracing that community swell of concern. Council supporting the community in this process, this advocacy work, advocating Vic Roads, the Minister, because as I said, there is concerns dating back 37 years. There is increased traffic observed by residents over recent years. We know that this area has increased in numbers. We know that people are going through this area, to try and get around the traffic congestion that we have along the highway. So people cutting through from Pakenham to Wellington Road via this area. We know that numbers have increased. There's concerns regarding drivers' knowledge of road rules when entering the intersection and a lack of signage. This road is not actually an intersection, as roads are not quite aligned. So a number of the intersections are offset. Drivers are often waving to indicate who goes first, and you can imagine the sort of confusion that goes about. Fortunately or unfortunately, because of there haven't been a large number of recorded collisions through the police, because you have to have injuries to have it reported as a crash stat. So that is fortunate that no one's injured, but there is real concern. There is a large number of collisions, and there is real concern that there could be serious collisions in the future if nothing is done. There's also concerns regarding the speed of traffic along Beaconsfield Emerald Road. There is a bit of a hump. Sight lines aren't great as people travelling down the hill from Emerald towards Beaconsfield through Upper Beaconsfield. There's difficulty driving across the intersection between Salisbury Road and St George's Road due to lack of visibility as drivers travelling along the road. I said that. Local residents expressing concerns regarding close shaves when entering the intersection from all roads. So there is a petition that Kate Canizzaro and the Upper Beaconsfield Association is supporting. That petition, I understand, is at the Upper Beaconsfield Primary School, the General Store in Upper Beaconsfield, and I believe maybe the post office. So interested residents, whether you live in Upper Beaconsfield or you're a resident of Cardinia and you want to support that petition, please sign that petition. That petition is addressed to the state government, so that will be forwarded to the state government. So I ask my fellow councillors to support me in this motion so council formally supports the community in this advocacy campaign to improve safety at this intersection. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Breton. Thank you. Seconder to speak, Councillor Jeff Springfield. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Owen for bringing this forward. I couldn't agree with him more. This intersection, it may have been fit for purpose many decades ago when it was a much quieter area, but it certainly does not meet the standards today. And I travel through there quite often, and there's always, you can see the look on people's eyes when they're looking across from one road to the other to figure out who's going to go and who's going to get an opportunity to jump out. It's not ideal by any means, and it is fortunate that we haven't had a serious accident there yet, but it is going to happen one day unless we can address this issue. So I fully support us doing whatever we can to advocate for this intersection, to have improvements to it, and hopefully we're listened to by the state government and we can see some action in this area in the near future. So thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Any other speakers on this subject? Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my ward colleagues. I agree with everything both of you have said. That it is a terrible intersection, whether it's in the middle of the day or at night time. Nobody knows who's supposed to go where or do what. The thing that really worries me is that this is a high fire risk area. What happens if there's an emergency there and there's high traffic trying to get through that intersection. It's an absolute recipe for disaster. It's not going to be an easy fix because of the way the road slopes, and there's that hump on the Emerald side. It's not going to be easy, but they've got to find some way of fixing it, and at the moment it just doesn't work, and it's only going to get worse. So I really applaud the Upper Beaconsfield Association for taking this on. It's been a long-term issue, but it is one that's really getting worse every day. So more than happy to support them in any way possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Colin Ross.
Thank you for bringing this issue up. I go back to an article that was written in the Pakenham Gazette back in the 8th of the 2nd, 2012. Residents for a roundabout in Upper Beaconsfield are going around in circles. Last week, more than 50 residents went along to a heated community meeting in the hall at Salisbury Road. Laurie Pritchard is one of the residents who has been calling for a roundabout at the corner of St George's Road, Salisbury Road and Beaconsfield Emerald Road for years. There's been a lot of discussion about it, he said. The meeting got quite heated and it was even generally constructive. People expressed their views, which sometimes were very different. Gembrook MP Brad Batten and Anita Curlow from the Vic Road spoke at the meeting. Mr Batten said that his office has conducted a survey about the issue and found that pedestrian safety was a priority. But for Mr Pritchard, it was one more complex, more complex than that, and he believed the residents expected a roundabout. The problem is pedestrian safety and the crossing, as well as a number of speeding motorists. This is back in 2012. In June 2000, it goes on to say, going down, it talks about needing a double B trucks to go through, to fit through, as being it's a Vic Roads road, and that would cost around about $2 to $4 million. The plan put forward by Vic Roads to put a traffic island and slowing down the line of sight requirements would be an elegant way of solving the problem without a roundabout. During the discussion in August, Mr Batten hosted a community meeting and reinstated his election commitment to improve the intersection. In an email to the Secretary of the Upper Beaconsfield Association later that month, he reinforced that the state government would deliver on its promise to improve pedestrian safety. We have raised a few issues surrounding and costing, and I'm pleased to say that very good working relationship with Council and Government will ensure that we do deliver this project. A motion was passed at the meeting to meet the Minister for Public Roads and Public Transport, Terry Mulder, to step in and speed up the process. And finishing the article, Mr Batten said Vic Roads would take into account the views of residents at the meeting. Improving safety at St George's and Beaconsfield Emerald intersection is an important commitment, and I will ensure that this will be delivered for our community of Upper Beaconsfield. That's what he said. I leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colin Ross. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, it's hard not to be, I support this, but it's very hard not to be negative about Vic Roads, because from experience, when I've tried to get intersections addressed, pedestrian crossings addressed, those types of things, they start looking at numbers. They're not really interested in numbers. The first thing they say is we haven't had many recorded accidents there. We haven't had any fatalities there. So until that happens, there are far more important intersections that need our money and our attention. So it's good to advocate and do all these types of things. And if we don't do it, we don't know how we're going to get on. But unfortunately, my impression of Vic Roads is that unless there's somebody been injured or somebody killed there, you are not going to climb the pecking order quickly. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other speakers on this subject? No. Before I go back to Councillor Brad Owen, yes, I was at that meeting. I remember being there. It was my welcome to council. That meeting was one of the first meetings I attended, and it was quite warm. It was a very entertaining night. But I do notice and recognise that this intersection was 1983 was recognised straight after Ash Wednesday, because that would have been the problem. Taking up on Councillor Wilmot's point, it would have been highlighted at that fire how bad that intersection would have been to move people around St George's Road there when that fire was coming through. It would have been a horrible situation, and that's when it was recognised to start with, and that's where it started. But I'll go back to you, Councillor B Owen, the mover, to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to all the councillors for your comments, and I look forward to working with my ward councillors particularly on this issue. And it is complex. The intersection is very tight. We've got the church very close by near the intersection, so there is some real challenges, and obviously physical obstructions and so forth. But we still want to continue to advocate for this. I want to follow up from what Councillor Brown did say. And the resident that's taken up this challenge recently wrote to Vic Roads, and in a response they got back on the 3rd of July from Vic Roads was, following this investigation, minor works at this intersection were undertaken, which included minor widening and line marking to reduce confusion and make it clearer who has right of way. So that was back in roughly 2010, 12-ish. As there is no demonstrated crash trend at this location, Vic Roads does not propose to make any modifications at this location. So that's the correspondence back in July. But, Council will continue to work with the community to really address this safety concern at this intersection. I want to thank the General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment for your commitment and assistance with councillors on this issue. So I look forward to this issue progressing and working with the community to hopefully improve the intersection. Thank you.
Well done, Councillor Owen. Thank you. Council signify in the usual manner for? Carried. Thank you. Councillors and gallery, that concludes discussions of the items withdrawn, as I said before, that's been indicated up for discussion. Can I have a motion, please, to adopt the recommendation for the balance of items listed? Can I have a mover? Councillor Jody Owen. A seconder, please, Councillor Wilmot. All those in favour for? Carried. Thank you. Reports of minutes of committees. I note that several reports from various committees have been tabled, in addition to the minutes of recent council briefing sessions, and these are available for any councillor wish to view them. Council reports. Councillors, any matters to report, please? Councillor Carol Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Just a few reports, just things that I've been doing within the community around the areas. One of the things that I got involved in was an environment of association called Wellsprings for Women. And I was invited to their luncheon, and it was in Dandenong. And it's in reference to women who are refugees and who have experienced domestic violence and not sure where to go. So they've had the support there from Wellsprings. And they also learn new skills and how to manage their life and their children, and the support of housing as well. So it's a great environment and a lot of networking for them with their own cultural backgrounds, and so that they feel at home. Of course, attending citizenship on the 25th of July, always interesting to go along and go to that. On Friday the 26th of July, I met Brendan Favola in Pakenham. He happened to be around the area, and quite an interesting character. He was another person I spoke to in reference to mental health, and he's very much on board about supporting that and getting it out there and getting the message to a lot more people within the football industry. And I felt like a real midget against him. He's quite a tall bloke. And the next day I met Matthew Richardson, and he's even taller. So a definite little little match on the floor there. I was against him, and he talked about mental health as well. So it's great to have their support in what they see as Royal Commission happening around the areas. I also went to the memorial of Lara Chol. I think it's Chol, is it Chol? Chol? Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Unfortunately, she 2 years ago, she was a victim of domestic violence, and so the community got together, and the police force were there, and quite a few other people that were great identities to involve ourselves with and get to know their culture and how they gathered together and mourn the service. But it was quite eye-opening and quite the music. We just didn't know really what to do, whether we should be dancing or whatever. So that was very interesting, but lovely to support them and meet these beautiful people. We had the round the table meeting, which is again part of Together We Can, which is a really great organisation. On the 9th, Friday the 9th, I went to the Women's Business Luncheon, as my fellow councillors did, and it was the magic of winging it. And it was the guest speaker was Emma Isaac. She has a book out, and I've started reading it, and it's a great book. It really gets you to the core where you need to go as far as, planning your life and planning it in a very less complex way. I was also at the with my fellow councillor Schilling at the Hollands Children's Centre with their new open space area. Wonderful work that the team has been doing with them, and it's great to see the development and the end result, and the children enjoying it and putting plants in the ground when it's freezing cold out there. On Wednesday the 14th, Councillor Schilling and I did street talk. We do this once a month, as a lot of you in the community would know, and we're very approachable. And we met a couple of people that are down there in the gallows there, supporting us and offering us a cup of coffee because it was freezing cold. But always getting a lot out of people coming up and talking to us about what's going on within the community and what their concerns are, and we like to follow them up. Councillor Moore and myself and Mayor, we went to the senior sits today, and it was their AGM meeting. So Mayor was a little bit bombarded by a lot of the questions, and so it was nice to sit back, and it wasn't me this time. So and it's always great to catch up with the senior sits, and also to Lakeside Children's Centre with their open space and their outdoor space. And meeting the team there. The last thing I want to add is that the blood bank is on this week. I talked about it last time, and it's important to give blood if you can, and next week as well. So hope to see you all down there. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carol Ryan. Councillor Jodie Owen, you need to leave now? Okay, you can leave now if you want to. Councillor Jodie Owen has to go to another appointment, so it's time for you to leave. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I know, Councillor Colin Ross. Yeah, shoot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just some of the activities over the last month or so that I've been involved in. The Metro Waste and Resource Recovery Group had, we're going to have a new CEO. Rob Millard's done an exceptional job over the last 13 years. And I must say, watch this space for the appointment. The person will start in October and is absolutely exceptional. So I think watch that space. On Friday night with the wind and rain, I attended the Pakenham Eels Rugby League Club's grand finals. They've been going for 3 years, and for the very first time at Cardinia, they had teams in grand finals. They happen to be the 14-year-old girls, and the 17-year-old girls are in grand finals, and they play a form of tag rugby. So they have tape hanging off their shorts, and they've got to pull those off. I must say the first team didn't win, but was very excited, the club, that they got to host the grand final in the wind and rain and the cold. The girls didn't win, but the 17-year-old girls did. So they finished up with their very first premiership. So they were extremely excited. And that was just a wonderful opportunity to go there and present the trophies and the medals to the participants. Also, too, I attended last month at the Narry Warren South Primary School, P to 10. They've got modular pavilions there, which are made up in different units, and they are far cheaper than getting them done the way we do, where we redesign everything all over again. We do it time after time after time, and I must say these are extremely impressive. They're very high quality. And council, some of our councillors visited another site earlier in the month. I couldn't attend that, so I attended that opportunity to go and have a look, watch this space. Also, too, I attended with some of my fellow councillors and Mr Mayor, the launch of the social and affordable housing policy. That was an extremely exciting opportunity, and I must say that the amount of people who turned up that were excited in this space was amazing. I look forward to seeing what we can do to help the community in that area. We also attended the Dolphin Gymnastics Club down in Carrum Downs. We've got a young gymnast from Upper Pakenham who's 17-year-old, and he's got involved in his gymnastics in a big way, and he finished up winning 2 gold medals at the Australian Championships in level 7 in at Hisense Arena, and they wanted me to come along as a representative of Cardinia Shire to acknowledge. His name was Jamison O'Reilly, and he does an absolutely amazing job, and I always point out that the parents in these areas do an amazing job too. These people train anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week. The parents drive all the way, which I know because I do the same thing, and it isn't cheap. So the dedication is a whole team effort. So congratulations, Jamison. Also too, I think I attended with some of my fellow councillors as well, the Casey Cardinia Business Award finals announcement at Bunjil Place. In the tourism area, we had 2 of the 3 finalists in Gumbaya World and 2 are local, both in Cardinia Shire. So they do a marvellous job, and I must say I can't wait to see. I hope one of the 2 wins the big award. Also, too, I attended with the mayor the citizenship ceremony, and we had over 130 people become new citizens of Australia and residents of Cardinia Shire. That's an extremely exciting time. I must say that's one of the most rewarding sessions, because people who have family members who change their citizenship, and it is such a life-changing thing, and it's so important, and often it's a very, very long journey these people have been on. Also too, I attended with some of my fellow councillors the Emerald SES Community Information Day, and the Deputy Premier was there to show their new facilities that they're going to have up in Emerald, and it's amazingly impressive. But I do note that they are the busiest SES of any station in Victoria, so they do an amazing job for our community and surroundings, and Ben Owen should be noted there as the captain of the organisation. He does an exceptional job and leads a wonderful team up there. And I can't wait to see something happen in that space. Also too, myself and the Mayor attended the Casey Cardinia Life Activities Group, which Councillor Brett Owen often attends, but he can't sometimes because he's working. And we went down there. I must say that it's an exceptional group of people. It targets mature age people who have got skills and talents that they can bring to other people in their group. I must say, they said, I spoke to some people there, and they said, you know, quite often when you get older, if you lose a partner or whatever, you do go through a period of loneliness, and when you've got supportive people around you, it is so warm and welcoming. And my last, I've got another 2. I went to the Interfaith group, which has got basically 10 different faiths represented. They've got an up-and-coming event in October, which you'll hear more about, and they're going to talk about what they contribute to our community with their volunteering and what they get involved in. So I can't wait for that space. They do some amazing work and they're very, very excited about helping in the community. And the last thing I'll mention is I got invited down for the first time in about 5 years down to Gippsland. We've got a resident living in Beaconsfield who happens to be the Secretary of the Gippsland Trades and Labour Council, 23 affiliated unions. He was the person who helped get the sound barriers in Beaconsfield through the group on the highway there, and also too helped save the Pakenham golf course from turning into residential housing, I must say, and they wanted an update on what's happened down there, because they can remember going back, I think it was 12 years ago, when the Cardinia Resident Ratepayers Association with Mrs Shallard contacted them to ask could they possibly help, because council had sold the land and were looking to develop it. At the time, they said, we think you should get a petition together. So they drew one up for them, they handed it to them, and the group went out and they acquired 2,500 signatures in 3 weeks, which was amazing. Then they organised a meeting to go in and meet the Minister, Justin Madden, in relation to the sale of the land and the rezoning. And through an independent panel, they decided that it would not be sold and it should be kept for open space recreation. Which was the will of Mrs Shallard and some others in their family when it was first handed over to council, which was on the front of a newspaper, shaking hands with council saying it will not be sold, we will be keeping it. Nevertheless, later they found an opportunity to sell it on a technicality, but that didn't happen. That was one of my impetuses to run for council, because I just thought the people who were there probably didn't understand what it meant to the community and it should be saved. I did get to highlight, and the Mayor will be opening this before he finishes his mayoral role, down at Deep Creek Reserve. I must say that project down there is going to be absolutely amazing. You've got basically the Cardinia Environment Coalition will have a new home. They will have an area where they can grow their plants. The golf course will have a new updated clubhouse, which will have many facilities there that the community can use as well. And I think the jewel on the crown will be the All Abilities regional playground that is down there. And as Councillor Owen pointed out, there isn't very many disability services that carry the detail and the thought put into it for these people to use. And I must say, it will be a destination on a holiday where you will drop in and have facilities that will cater for people of all abilities. Also too, there is opportunity in the wetlands down there where there is a walkway now. There will be more stages put in future. So I think that is amazing that this area, through people who stood up in the community and said we need to do something about this, it's changed. I must say they were extremely excited, the fact that they'd been part of helping the group initiate that. Anyway, that's all I'm going to report, because I could continue, but I'm not going to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Thank you very much for your report. I'll go to, and don't forget the dragonfly down there that is in that playground called Graham. Really nice name for a dragonfly. Councillor Brett Owen, thank you.
Just briefly, Mayor, thank you. On the 27th of July, I attended the Upper Beaconsfield Fire Brigade annual dinner and awards night, and I know a number of councillors have attended a number of CFA awards nights over the last 12 months or whatever. This is an annual event, but it was really pleasing to be present. A number of volunteer firefighters from Upper Beaconsfield was recognised for their service. So they were 5, 10, 15, up to 40 years service. Amazing contribution. So members who experienced Ash Wednesday also received awards in those service awards. But also there was awards for the number of call-outs. There was one volunteer that went to over 1,000 call-outs for the Upper Beaconsfield Fire Brigade. And my understanding is it's a smaller brigade, so they don't attend as many call-outs as others, but I think over 100, about 130 a year is the average. So for one person to get over 1,000 call-outs is a massive contribution. So I acknowledge all those people in those awards. Back on the 27th of July, also the Rangers Ward councillors and I attended the inaugural John Dudley Portrait Prize. It's amazing. John Dudley was an amazing person. I first met John when we were inaugural members of the Cardinia Ratepayers and Residents Association back in, I think, 2003. But John was an amazing Emerald person, a person that was fantastic at his artwork, a great teacher. He was one of the members of the Melbourne 20, which is the elite group of Melbourne artists. So it was a great way to remember John, who passed away in 2008. So this will be an annual prize, and it was well received, and it was great to have June there, his wife and family there, and council will be supporting next year's event through the events and events grants. The annual charity dinner for the Casey Cardinia Foundation is coming up on Friday the 11th of October 2019, so I encourage your councillors, as many officers and staff and residents as possible can attend. Tickets are $135, so it's reasonable. It's a great cause, so if you can, please attend on the 11th of October. I'm one of the directors for the Casey Cardinia Foundation. And finally, it was great that council started the process for the design of a pavilion at the Upper Beaconsfield Rec Reserve. Last week we started the process. The working group commenced. That involves councillors, obviously all the stakeholders. Anyone who's been to the change room at Upper Beaconsfield Rec Reserve will see that it's appalling. It is not appropriate for unisex, it is definitely unacceptable. So I look forward to that project progressing for us to deliver improved facilities for the Upper Beaconsfield Rec Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowan. Any other reports from councillors? No other? Councillor Ross did mine for me, which is very nice of him. Thank you very much. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So we've got the presentation of petitions. Do we have any petitions this evening, councillors? No petitions, great. So we'll move on to community question time. And I want to thank the gallery for hanging around. I know it's been a long haul tonight. I would want to ask Phyllis Bold whether my jumper's been knitted yet or whether it's finished, because I thought you started at the start of the meeting and I thought it should be finished by the end. So thank you for that. So we'll move on. We've received a question from Rodrigo Bardales, if that's right. Is he here? Thank you very much for being here, for being in the gallery, and thanks for your question. I'll refer your question to the General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr. Benesic, to read the question and give you an answer. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for your question. As a father of 2 young kids, I made a commitment to look after them and ensure they have a promising future to grow up in. Probably a nice question in relation to climate. Yeah. Since I found out about climate change, probably quite pertinent with the lights going down, and the implications to our planet if we don't act, I've made a commitment to help as much as I can to raise the awareness around climate change and support and implement initiatives where I can. This is at home, work, and the community. So I would like to know, when will our council be declaring a climate change emergency rather? It is a great way to raise awareness and put pressure on national government to take action once and for all. The scientific community has already spoken. There is consensus on the issue of climate change, and we also know the outcomes of the recent IPCC report. So reality is that we don't have much time. We need to act, and we need to act now. Our only hope is action. Thank you. In response, Mr. Bardels, Cardinia Shire Council is actively supporting and investing resources in climate change initiatives. At a local level, Council's aspirational energy transition plan charts mitigation actions, initiatives to reduce organisational and community emissions. The energy transition plan also outlines emission reduction targets for both council and the community. Council has set an aspirational target of 0 net organisational emissions by 2024. Investment in around 1,500 rooftop solar panels, environmental upgrades to projects to improve energy efficiencies of existing and new council buildings are a few of council's long-running projects aimed at mitigating current and future emissions across the Shire. At a regional level, Cardinia Shire Council is a founding member of the South East Council Climate Change Alliance, SECA. SECA is a group of 8 councils in the South East working on collaboratively responding to adaptation impacts of climate change. SECA provides a regional platform for far-reaching climate action projects with regional benefits. Cardinia Shire Council and other member councils provide responses advocacy to national government climate inquiries and legislator. These responses articulate and stress to state and national governments the urgent need for climate action. Council is aware of the emerging trend to declare a climate emergency. At this stage, Council is concentrating its resources to continually develop and disseminate projects to reduce emissions and strengthen our resilience of the Cardinia community. Until such time, Council will continue leading by example in the development and implementation of mitigation projects and climate action initiatives.
Thank you, Peter. Mr. Bardiles, well, we can have that answer given to you in writing if you prefer. Yes. Yep. That's so. Well, you could, if you want to hang around after the meeting. We can't actually take questions at this moment from you. We've answered the question that you've asked. If you want to hang around, Mr. Benezik has got all night to speak to you. So well, that's my opinion. He can further the conversation if you want to ask a question or two more, and we can still get it to you in writing as well to explain the situation even further, if that's okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. Right, thank you, Peter. And thank you for your offer to stay all night. It's very kind of you. We have received 2 questions from Wayne Andrews. Is Wayne in the gallery? Oh, yes, there's Wayne at the front. I see. I'll refer your first question to the General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr. Benezik, also. Thank you, Peter. Could you read the question and the answer as well, please?
Through you, Mayor.
Thank you.
In the budget papers under the garbage collection and waste disposal, the cost for residential garbage, 1 times 120 litre bin and 1 recycling bin is $283.70. What is the actual cost for collection of the recycling bin? A response to that question. The composition of the garbage charge is made up of a number of services in addition to the collection and disposal of various recycle and rubbish bins. The garbage charge amount incorporates services such as public place litter collection and recycling, hard and green waste collection, waste education and dump rubbish, to name a few. Unfortunately, during the disruptions of the recycling industry, the recycling materials going to landfill came at an increased cost to council and the overall service. Of the $283.70 per residence, approximately $60 is allocated to the recycling bin collection and disposal, and $120 is allocated to the landfill and collection and disposal.
Thank you, Peter. You can also, Wayne, you could also have that answer in writing as well if you prefer. Thank you, Mr. Benezik, if you could forward that on to Mr. Andrews in due course. Okay, we have a second question from Wayne Andrews, and I will direct it to the Manager of Governance, Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, could you read the question and give the answer, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question, Mr. Andrews. Question reads, having reviewed the latest budget, 2019-20, could you please tell me where I can find the true cost of governance compared to rates, roads and rubbish as a percentage?
answer your question, Mr. Andrews. The annual budget will not provide the specific information that you are seeking. The best place to find this type of information is on the Know Your Council website. This website includes financial and other information for all councils in Victoria, and you can compare one council against another or several if you wish to do so. On this website, governance is defined as the operating expenses directly related to the activities of the elected councillors. You can also refer to the Essential Services Commission reports that provide details of the outcomes of rate capping in Victoria from both an income and expenditure perspective. In these reports, governance includes council operations, public safety, general and administrative operations, and disaster relief, amongst other things. We'll be able to provide the website addresses for both these reports in a written response to Mr. Andrews, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so you'll receive a written response for this, Mr. Andrews, and that satisfies your question. Thank you. Okay, we also have received questions from Ms. Gloria O'Connor, and I recognise Gloria O'Connor in the gallery. Nice to see you here, Gloria. I refer your questions to General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr. Benesic, to read the questions and provide the answers to Ms. O'Connor. Thank you, Peter.
Through you, Mayor, and thank you for your question, Mrs. O'Connor. Can you please advise whether there has been an appeal to the VCAT concerning the non-approval application for Narnagoon Latter Road proposed landfill project? I can confirm that at this point of time, Council has not received an appeal to the refusal issued. Second question, has the identity of the actual owners of property 48 to 50 James Street, Pacton, been available to interested residents in the application for the high-rise development on those sites? If not, why not? The response to that question, title details as submitted as per the planning permit application show the owners at 48 James Street, Pakenham as Hallison International Holdings Proprietary Limited, and the owners at 50 James Street, Pakenham as Diffume Proprietary Limited. Final question. Why are residents on the properties located south of Officer expected to travel on extremely bad, unmade and unmaintained roads in the area that are set aside for future developments? And for how long? Who is responsible for the roads once developers have planned the future use of the land? The response, there is limited development growth within the Cardinia Shire directly impacting unsealed roads in the Officer South. And when it does occur, these roads are either sealed or maintained by the developer while works are occurring. We are aware of private works that have recently been happening on a property in Officer South that have not been subject to planning approval and are not deemed as to be the formal development, but involve volumes of traffic movements. Council have been working with the landowners to achieve accountability around damage to roads and maintenance within these activities whilst these activities are occurring. And we will continue to maintain the roads in accordance with our obligations under the Road Management Plan.
Thank you, Mr. Benesic. Could you formalise those in writing, the answers to Ms. O'Connor's questions, and send them on to her in due course, please? Thank you for us. Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. A reminder to councillors and staff will be available after the meeting if you wish to discuss the responses provided to these questions. Now we move on. We're nearly there, okay? Nearly there, people. Now we move to councillors' question time. Councillor B Owen, you have some questions you wish to ask Mr. Benesic. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate it's late. So the questions is to the General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, Peter Benesic. It is disappointing that we have not seen the first stage of Kenilworth Avenue, section between Brunt Road and Princess Freeway overpass, recommence construction after almost 2 years since work ceased. Can you please provide Council with an update of the current status of the long-awaited sealing of the Kenilworth Avenue? And some further questions on other matters. Can you please provide updates on the following projects issues? Intersection upgrades along the Princess Highway as part of the federal government commitment, particularly of O'Neill Road and Glismann Roads in Beaconsfield, and I note that was discussed earlier. Speed reduction through the Beaconsfield Township as part of the temporary traffic measures for the O'Neill Road, Old Princess Highway intersection. And finally, progress of the development of additional car parking at various railway stations in the growth corridor, including the Beaconsfield Railway Station, both state and federal government election commitments. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, and I'll answer those questions in the sequence that they were asked. In relation to Kenilworth Avenue, I can report that officers have continued to negotiate with the developer responsible to deliver the works to urge the developer to allow contractors to recommence back on site. Council officers have recently received revised traffic management plans from the contractor indicating that there is an intention for the works to recommence. It is understood, however, there are still business agreements between the parties to be finalised before this occurs. Officers are meeting with the developer this week to confirm the status of negotiations. I'll just move my questions, sorry. In relation to Glismann and O'Neill Road, Council officers are currently seeking prices for detailed designs of O'Neill Road and Glismann Road and Bayview intersections. Taking this into consideration, the pre-planning requirement, given the magnitude of the program, works on the ground will possibly commence as soon as late 2020. In relation to the speed reduction through Beaconsfield, Vic Roads are currently reviewing the speed zone signage on the Old Princess Highway in the vicinity of O'Neill and O'Neill Road and Beaconsfield, with a view to potential reductions from 80 to 70 kilometres an hour. But no formal confirmation has been received at this stage. Council has supported the proposed change in consultation with Vic Roads. And finally, Councillor, the Beaconsfield Railway Station. Progress in the development of additional parking at the various railway stations in the growth corridor, including Beaconsfield Railway Station. Council officers at this point have not been able to confirm the arrangements of where these projects there are, but I can confirm that officers are meeting with state agencies across to confirm a number of infrastructure projects across our region.
Okay, that concludes tonight's proceedings. And I want to thank you all for your attendance and your patience and staying back and listening to our debates and reports. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.